Hello, YouTube. I've been thinking about recording this video for a while now. Basically, um, I started Maado, a company that helps global talent find remote work about a year and 7 months ago. And I've been really thinking about taking everything that I've learned and what I think it takes to succeed to find and keep remote work. I wanted to create a YouTube video on that, just everything that I can think of. Um, this is probably going to be very low production. Um, I just want to see if this is something that a lot of other people have interest in. Just make the first video go as in depth as much as I can. Um, yeah, and just get going. So um, it's going to be me, but for the most part, you're just going to see um, this as I speak and just basically write out all the different things that I think are important to find and keep remote work. So the first thing is you need a remote work skill. Um, and I think it's obvious to a lot of people where, for example, if you wanted to do carpentry remotely, it's not going to be a thing, right? Like there are some skill sets that are going to really be a good fit for remote work. And typically, software development is one of them. Another, they're very popular. Sales, there you get marketing. Um, these are like some very, very common ones. Virtual assistant kind of stuff. So now, like, software is probably the most common one. A lot of people um, do software kind of work globally, remotely. Sales is another one. Mostly SDR type of work. I've never really seen a lot of account executive type of roles being filled. It's been a lot of more cold calling. It's been a lot of appointment setting, those kind of things. And then you get marketing. With marketing, it's a bit. Um, w- One of the things that I've learned is depending on where you are located globally, uh, what marketing is in your local context might be very different from, let's say, what marketing is in the US and Canada. And today, that's kind of what our focus is: how to find remote work, US slash Canada. That is kind of that's the focus for what we're doing today. So in marketing, for example, for the place that we source a lot of talent from, which is Ethiopia, most of marketing tends to be print, tends to be video, um, video content through TV and radio. So a lot of digital marketing that's very common in the US and Canada is not as developed, which makes it so that those who say they do digital marketing out of Ethiopia tend to have a big gap in their skill sets. So if you are in marketing and you want to work in marketing remotely, make sure that you fill that gap. Make sure you learn as much as you can about the digital marketing side, and that would include Google Ads, that would include SEO, and stuff related to that. So, and then of course VAs, very very common, a huge market for this. So the second thing is you need English communication skills. Um, Now, I've noticed this is both, depending on your role, spoken and written. Um, so for stuff like, let's say, what we talked about earlier with software, um, your written is a lot more important. And essentially, you're actually communicating in a different language. It's code. And if you're really good at speaking that language, your spoken and written is not as important as long as you're directly working with somebody who's technical. They will understand, um, and it's not going to be a problem. However, when you get into sales and marketing or virtual assistant, those kind of roles, your spoken and written is going to start to become really, really important. And within this, grammar is a big deal. Most people on this side, on the North American side, don't really make a lot of grammar mistakes. And I think even if you're global, there isn't really a good reason to have those kind of issues show up in what you're doing, because Um, Essentially, you can use something like Grammarly, a very simple tool to make sure that your spelling and everything is correct. The other thing that's going to be important is in your spoken, especially in client facing roles, accents are going to matter. Um, and I've had questions from a lot of people where they say, Jonas, like, why do you focus on accents so much? And and the main reason is because they do matter on this side. And to give yourself a good reason as to help you understand why, um, whatever local language that you're speaking, imagine like 9 people that speak the same way that you do, and then one person who's learning that local language and who has an accent. They tend to stick out, right? Anybody who comes into a culture and doesn't speak um, the neutral or natural way, um, immediately they would stick out. And in a lot of situations that can be um, a, a problem or an issue for some companies that are hiring. So it is important. um, it is what it is. Like, so the most a few people definitely think that um, you can't do anything about it, and that's not true. We've seen a lot of movies where somebody who's British will have an American accent, somebody who is American will have a British accent, and there are definitely accent coaches and stuff that you can utilize to change even your accent. So it's not that it's static, but just know that it has impact, especially depending on the kind of roles that you're doing. Um, and I would say for the most part, the difficulty is like getting your foot in the door, right? Getting that first opportunity. Once you get remote work with a North American company and you start having those on your resume, the requirement, like people will give you a chance because they look at it and say, hey, this person has already successfully been working in North America. So they have something going for them. Now, these two are some of the things that we need to think about first. And then, of course, you have to know how to find the roles. And then within this, there's the search. It's its own skill. Like all of these things are their own skill set. So there's the search side. There's the how to apply is its own thing. How to interview. This is very important. And then, of course, you need to maintain, and finally, you need to grow or progress in your role. Um, let's call this find and keep. Let's call this find and keep. And another thing is cultural understanding. This is actually might be number one of work. One thing that I've consistently seen um, in placing talent from a global context into U.S. and Canadian companies is you really need to have a cultural understanding of what work looks like in North America. And a lot of people that come from very social cultures, what work looks like in their context is very different from how work looks like in North America. It's a very work focused culture. So things like um, timeliness, like deadlines, um, you know, the whole attitude towards work is going to be very different. For example, like in North America, if you, let's say, miss a meeting that somebody has set, right? You have a one-on-one. Let's call it an interview. You have an interview. You don't show up. That is something very offensive on this side. And to give you a similar example on, um, let's say, a very social culture in Ethiopia, for example, if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want you to come to my wedding. I want you to come to my wedding. This is the invitation." It would be very, very rude for you to decline, right? You should show up, and you must show up, and people will take it very personal if you don't. Similar thing in, let's say, funerals. If somebody that you know, even if they're at an acquaintance level, if a family member, a close family member passes away, you have to go and pay your respects. Now that's those are the requirements of a very social culture. Well, whereas in North America, it's very different. So in the same scenario, for example, with the wedding scenario, I've heard with my own ears, just blown away. I was so surprised. Somebody say to another other person inviting them, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have a trip planned to Mexico that weekend, so I can't make it." And I was expecting stuff to go down. I was like, "Okay, there's gonna be a problem," but no. In reality, um, it's part of the culture. The other person, oh, that's totally fine. It's okay, whatever. And then they passed on. Same thing in funerals. Sometimes people don't even tell you somebody close to them has passed away, and the social fabric doesn't exist. But then when it comes to work, if you miss a meeting, it's like not attending somebody's wedding or not showing up for a funeral. If you miss a deadline or something that you've committed to, it's very, very rude and offensive. And I've noticed, like, on the some of the people that I'm trying to help, they just don't understand that. For them, in the culture that they're in, these things are not that serious. They're not that deep. Yeah, I missed a deadline, it's whatever. Or I couldn't find a taxi or whatever. I couldn't make the meeting, or my internet went down, the power went out, etc. And all of these reasons, people understand each other because they're like, okay, I understand. You have a problem. Um, I'm supposed to understand you because we're living in a society that there's a lot of things that are lacking. But on the North American side, there's almost zero excuses for any of that. You can't say your internet went down because 99% of the time, everybody has really good internet and it never goes down. So when you use that as an excuse or as a reason, and it might be a very valid reason, people will think, okay, this person is lazy, they're not interested in working, they gave me some excuse that makes absolutely zero sense, etc., etc. So cultural understanding of what is expected on the North American side has been huge, and I've lost a bunch of placements because of this. So I've had people that didn't show up for interviews, didn't, and then afterwards they would have a reason. Oh, this happened and that happened, etc. Or they didn't follow up with deliverables after an interview. Um, Whether it's content that they've written or different things, they just didn't do what was required, and they all had their own different reasons, but they didn't understand that these kind of things are a deal breaker. It's basically game over. And I would say cultural understanding of work might be the biggest hiccup I see. A lot of people would have the remote work skill, they would have the English communication skill, and the cultural understanding of work trips them up quite a bit. So that's another thing that I think is really important. Um, and then, of course, setting up for success, let's call it that. Setting up for success. And these are things like your LinkedIn, right? Like um, how optimized it is, and of course related to that is your CV, cover letters, um, and I would say, like, your LinkedIn needs to be top notch. Just everybody on North America, if they're looking to hire you, they will always check your LinkedIn. So that's actually a huge opportunity. I don't know why I did that. It doesn't matter. So it's a huge opportunity for you to showcase your skill set. Actually a huge opportunity. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity to showcase your skill set, and in whatever role that you're looking for work in, optimizing your LinkedIn is going to be huge value. The other is content creation. I'll also call it portfolio. So if you are a software developer, have a portfolio. And I've had some conversations with people where they're like, "Well, I just graduated out of college. I don't have a like I haven't worked anywhere, so I don't have something I can show. And that's not true. Even if you just graduated, you have projects that you've done before that you can showcase. You can start your own personal projects just to showcase your technical skill set, building a couple of apps, especially if they're live. That's huge. You just show it to them, and then you can say, hey, look at my portfolio of different things that I've built using my skill set in this coding language. That's going to make a huge difference. Same thing for graphic designers, right? Like having a portfolio is going to be super important. For roles like in sales and marketing or VA roles, I would say your portfolio is should be in the form of content creation. That's kind of how I envision it, where if you're, let's say, a sales professional, then talk about your expertise, record it, and use that content as your portfolio. And LinkedIn is going to be very powerful here, or whatever social platform makes sense, where if you put some videos that show that you're an expert or you understand what you're talking about, when somebody comes to check out your LinkedIn, that video will be there. And that will be a huge marketing tool for you to help you land remote roles. So essentially, this is kind of the general um, areas. I would kind of say, hey, if you're looking to find remote work, these are the things you should consider. So number one is the skill, remote work skill. Um, if I was gonna order them, like number one would be that English communication is gonna be super important, and then cultural understanding is gonna be huge. Um, Setting up for success will help, but of course, the finding and keeping remote jobs, it's its own skill set. So I want to dig into some of them. So, for example, for search, knowing how to use Google to find the roles that you're looking for. Sometimes, like LinkedIn, can be a bit tough, like um, because a lot of jobs that you see might not be an entry level. With quick apply and some of these options, it actually, if you're applying out of country, unless there's a setting in there that makes it so that you automatically get filtered out. So Google is still very powerful. I would say knowing how to search for remote roles on Google, on remote job boards, um, just finding the roles is a skill set in itself. Applying is huge. I think everything that you learn about remote roles, everything that you understand, all the different components are to some extent irrelevant if you don't apply. You just have to show up. You have to apply to those roles. And then within this, you have to figure out, make sure your CV is ATS compliant. So a lot of companies, you would use an applicant tracking system to filter do the first round of screening, this first screening round. So essentially, you want to make sure that the AI that does that does not filter out your CV. So there are formats for how you do this. Just make sure you do that. And then, of course, when you apply, cover letters and different things are going to be important. There's a whole science around this. There's so many things that you can do to improve your chances. But at the end of the day, unless you apply, you can't find remote work. It's very, I would say, it's very obvious, but sometimes people get overwhelmed, right? And volume is so important, right? It's a volume game. It's a number game. It's a numbers game. Like you have to apply probably like 200, 300 times. 200, you have to send out like 200, 300 applications potentially to get 3 interviews, which might lead to one job. So I think a lot of people just give up too quickly. Like they apply 10 times or 20 times or 30 times. They're like, oh yeah, I tried to apply. I look for remote work. And that's not how it goes. Even on the North American side, people looking for local jobs, local work, you're gonna have to put in the effort. And it's very, very grindy. We do it on behalf of our talent for Maado. We try and make that process a lot easier. for our pre-vetted people. But at the end of the day, you're still gonna have to figure that out. Interviewing, there's some interesting things. Your culture will matter. Your culture will matter. Um, and I've sat in quite a few interviews where Ethiopians were interviewing, and in Ethiopian culture, you're supposed to be very humble. You're not supposed to talk about your skill sets. You're not supposed to, it's seen as if you're boasting in a way. Whereas in North America, from an early age, you learn how to present yourself. You learn how to talk about your skill sets. It's encouraged. This is not something that is seen as if it's negative. It's actually encouraged. So now imagine how a person who grew up in the first culture, when they are in an interview, when somebody asks them, "Hey, can you do this?" If they can do it at like 75%, they're not going to be confident enough to say, "Yeah, I could do this. I'm pretty good at this." Usually they end up, saying, "Yeah, I've done that before. Like I know how to do it." Um, Whereas 75% is like 150% in North America. If you know how to do something 75% and you are in an interview, you say, "Yep, I know how to do it 100%. Yeah, I could do that." And then if you know something at 50%, you say, "Yeah, I've got some experience with it. I have some experience with it. I've done that before." And then at 25, it's like, I have some amount, I have experience, and I'm a very quick learner, etc. And I've noticed from where cultures kind of don't encourage that. Even when people know something 100%, they don't lean into it. They don't say, "Yes, I've done this before, and these kind of projects, it was very successful, and I'm very confident in my skill set." That's not something that you'd hear. So I've definitely had to coach a few people where I say, "Hey, you need to speak about your skill set. You need to be more confident. You need to say it like it is." And I don't advocate for lying, but there's this sense of false humility where even when you're really good, you're not supposed to say so, which will absolutely derail any efforts that you have to find remote work. So maintaining a huge part of maintaining is culture. If you understand the culture and you know how to work with people, it's gonna be really good. You can maintain your jobs, and then growing, of course, that's a whole different thing, and I'm not gonna talk about that at this point. Um, and I just realized, I just realized, I'm actually gonna put it here. So for um, English communication and soft skills. Okay, I'm just gonna put this here just so that you don't think I forgot. But yeah, like it's kind of soft skills and communication are kind of tied together a little bit. These are elements such as knowing the proper cadence to follow up, or communicating ahead of time. Let's say if you can't meet a deadline or you're gonna be late to a meeting, just that those kind of things actually help out quite a bit. If you can't meet a deadline, to say, "Hey, um, I ran into something unexpected. I can't meet the deadline on Friday, but I will deliver by Monday." As opposed to Friday comes, you don't say anything. You're basically ghosting the person that's expecting something from you. So these are some of the things that I think are really important for finding remote work. And yeah, like I'm gonna my plan is in the future I'll start digging more and more into all these different elements. And if you have any questions, please, like, just send me a message. Like, I'm very active on my LinkedIn, and you can also put questions in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah, so thank you for, if you listened all the way up to this point, thank you for being here. um I'm super passionate about helping people find remote work roles. If you have any questions, please, as I said, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you. This is Yonas from Maado. Until next time.